Yeah, we're on. Beautiful.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the End-to-End Live session. For this session, we'll record an episode of the Beyond Coding podcast. And today I have with me Zowie Langdon from BUX Crypto. Zowie has a very broad background in a lot of things, and we'll start with his more of entrepreneurial background. Is that kind of a nice description for it?
I guess you could say that.
Yeah. I did a lot of research on you, obviously, for this show, especially because it's live now, and this is our first live show as well. And I saw you started with a lot of startups, actually, but the one that stood out to me was Blockport.
Right.
Can you explain to our audience what Blockport kind of is and how it got to be?
Sure. Yeah. Blockport was definitely one of the most, intensive ones.
Yeah.
It's crypto related, so that already kind of makes it interesting. We started this, the idea itself in 2017.
Yeah.
As we got more into crypto, we realized that the real importance is to make it available for a lot of people and make it easily accessible because it's very abstract.
Yeah.
So Blockport was intended to be a kind of three-phased strategy.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, offering to users just very simple crypto trading.
Yeah.
So basically aggregating external exchanges to offer a simplified interface to that.
Okay.
Because you don't want to think about all these complicated charts and such. And then the second phase is social trading. We really believe that there's a very kind of the social dynamics is something that you can utilize very well, not only for a business but also for user engagement and sharing information and learning for users.
Yeah.
And then the third one is because we believe in the ideology behind crypto, still do. We believe that decentralization should ideally be an aspect also of these trading platforms that we were building. And that's why we intended as the third phase basically to launch it as a hybrid decentralized exchange, as you call it.
Yeah.
And that basically means you'll have a similar experience to what you would have on a typical crypto exchange. But in our case, there would actually be quite some scenarios where you would be the holder or at least the only custodian or shared custodian of your crypto. So that makes it less risky.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, it's more interesting.
Yeah. Well, the second phase you mentioned was kind of social trading.
Yeah.
That term is not familiar with me. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a good question. As we started to figure out exactly how we wanted to build it, we also realized that it's quite a lot more complicated than you might make it out to be.
Yeah.
The idea really is to be able to initially just copy other people, right? So trading, but also crypto trading, is generally considered pretty complicated. It's challenging, and it's also very risky. So in that sense, it's really nice if not only you can learn from other people, but also you can actually delegate some of your assets to other people that might be more effective as traders or just more knowledgeable and experienced.
Oh, interesting. So they would actually gain access to your funds and be able to trade with it?
Well,
or is it not that simple?
Luckily, not access to their to funds. That would definitely raise some eyebrows, I guess. But so what it would work like is, imagine you hold some portfolio in stocks or in crypto.
Yeah.
Then I, as someone that doesn't understand all of that, I can say, well, I think Patrick is an awesome trader. I want to dedicate part of my portfolio to his moves. So basically, I'm going to copy your moves.
Oh, okay.
And that was the initial idea.
Yeah.
Good reactions on that also when we did like user tests and such. But in reality, it's actually pretty complicated to build.
Yeah.
And we didn't end up releasing it eventually. So.
Okay, yeah. I have heard of it then, because nowadays you kind of call it shadow trading, I guess. Or
right.
you shadow someone and you trade based off their trades.
Yeah.
That's in essence what it was then.
Yeah. eToro also, for example, offers this. It's copy trading, also called.
Yeah. Exactly. I've seen one of those ads on
Right.
On YouTube.
Yeah.
So let's move back to 2017 then. What were you doing at the time, and how did you transition into this startup?
Right. So at that time, I was running a web development agency.
Yeah.
And it went quite well. We did interesting stuff for, in particular, Election Compass and Independer. Election Compass is a Kieskompas in Dutch, is a voting advice application. It's quite common and used here. It's quite an interesting topic. But then at that time, I already got in touch with who are now my co-founders, and we shared a lot of ideology and vision regarding autonomy and such. And we, first of all, it was just ideas. I mean, we were interested in crypto. We knew what Ethereum was.
Yeah.
We held a little bit of Bitcoin. And there was the gulden back in the day. That was a crypto that we were excited about.
Yeah.
And after a while, we realized that whenever we explained to, say, friends or parents what it actually was that we were, thinking about and doing, we found it really, really difficult to do. Nowadays, I guess it's a little bit easier because it's in the newspapers and all that.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was difficult. So we realized that and we really believe, of course, in this product, right? So I think that was really the fundament of us starting it, and me deciding also to move out of the startup that I had back then. So basically, I had to delegate all the projects and move on to something new, is because crypto, and hopefully we can get into that, can really change a lot of things for the better. Now it's all ideology, but we need to actually put in time and effort to try to make that work. So that's why we decided to just give it a go, basically, and then we launched an ICO.
What is that?
So an ICO is, if you're familiar with an IPO, it's basically when a company goes public. So you can buy the share or trade the shares on a particular exchange. And in our case, an ICO was just an initial coin offering. So you do something similar, but then you create a token that is tied to the business that you're launching.
Okay.
And usually this happens with a white paper that you release, or first right, naturally, and then you have to get a community around that. You have to tell people what your idea is, and of course put time into marketing, and then you have a date on which people can send. In our case, it was Ethereum to a smart contract address, and then they get back the token that you already released on the chain. And we did this, and it was really funny. We were only with 3 people, and we were in this co-working space, sitting behind the laptops. So you have to imagine, like, there was nothing serious yet about the whole idea. It was just kind of scrappy. We're going to do this ICO. We're going to do marketing and see if it works. We have this idea. And we were really lucky also to get good advisors. So we had people from BWC and Osborne Clark and such. They really helped us out at that time because there's a lot of new stuff. But we were sitting behind our laptops doing the ICO, and I remember I built this progress bar just to show like how far are we actually with the fundraising. And I remember being a little bit worried, like, is this going to work? Did I make a mistake? Because it was all really hasty, and I just coded something together to try and make it work to kind of track the Ethereum chain. And after like a few minutes, the bar was full. And
a few minutes?
Yeah, so I was like, that can't
what
be
happened?
Right. So turns out that we were just completely sold out. In a few minutes. So that was a fascinating moment because I was actually scrambling to kind of figure out, like, did something go wrong? Perhaps security related, or, there's a lot of stuff that goes wrong with ICOs, and it was pretty new back then. But no, it turns out that we just were completely sold out, and we were super surprised by that. Then the real story started, basically, and we had to kind of set up an actual company and such.
That's awesome. So for an ICO, you start, obviously, because you created, let's say, this coin, you start out holding all of it, right?
Well, yes and no. So in that case, we would be the owner, basically, of the contract that more or less creates or distributes this token. But you're not the direct holder, even though theoretically you are the custodian, because we could decide to do something with that token. But it's really it's just built into the contract that you have to send Ether, and then you can get the token back.
And how did those people receive the token, for example? Because for them it's an investment, right? They believe in your vision, they believe in your product. So for them it's an investment, and for that they get back the token that you created. Did they hold it somewhere? Did they hold it on the platform that you already created, or how does that usually go?
So at that time we didn't offer that. I think that would be something you call an initial exchange offering, where you do something similar to what we did, but then you actually use an exchange rather than only a blockchain. And so in our case, people sent their Ethereum to us, and what they got back in the same address was our token. So it's an ERC20 token, as you call that, which is a standard that you can use to create a token on the Ethereum network, and now also on other chains. And that's basically what they bought and got into their own wallet, so they could still use the same private key and such, or whatever they use to.
Awesome.
The wallet.
So circling back to that progress bar moment, you saw it completely filled up, which means people were interested and they actually had stake in the game now, at least a little bit. What was the next step then?
Right. So the next step, and this was a really big learning moment. We were very, very ambitious. And I think in the end, you're capable enough to kind of envision we're going to be able to build this, and on a high level, you understand, like, this is what we're going to do. we had to scramble to get like a team together fast because we didn't have a product that was live yet. We needed to deliver something, and suddenly you have a community and also people that you have to, I mean, you're accountable for something.
Yep.
They invested, even though there's not something like investor protection. It goes without saying that that's something that's just out of general ethics. You should really
responsible for
it. So that was pressurizing. We had to really scramble to get together a team. So we tried to do that as fast as possible, and naturally it really helped that you're kind of this exciting project, right? So to get engineers on board and good ones that are interested in this domain was actually remarkably easy.
Okay.
It was more difficult to think about the underlying, like, domain knowledge was still pretty, and it still is pretty scarce. There's not a lot of people that know a lot about crypto. At least the underlying tech. So that was a challenge for sure. But we had really good people. And actually, I decided to not hire for people that already knew it, but rather people that were interested and seemed very, very capable of picking it up. Eventually, that was actually a good decision.
So rather than testing their domain knowledge, you tested their technical skills, or how did you go about this? Because you were the one, together with your co-founders, that went hiring, basically.
Yeah. So I know that hiring is a hot topic and it's a complicated one as well. And I think everyone has his own kind of strategy where it really depends also on the situation. If you're a startup and there's not really a structure that you can hire for.
There's no guideline.
No, it's like you're not even going to be able to tell someone this is what you'll be doing. It's basically, this is our idea. You want to join or not?
They need to believe in that vision.
So it was more, at that time at least, it was more about personality. So I do generally try to get a good perspective of someone's values in the first conversation, because I think culture and values are very interrelated. And it's a person's values that you really see on a day-to-day basis whenever they have to make a decision. And considering there is barely or basically no process, it comes down to a lot of decisions and a lot of responsibility initially. So that's what I really tried to focus on.
Awesome.
And it worked, I think. I hope.
So then how did you test for that? Just in a general one-to-one conversation, stuff about ownership and responsibility and all that?
Yeah, so I really like sketching difficult situations. I really want to understand, what does someone do under pressure? Because there is constant pressure and things are going to go wrong, perhaps very badly. Luckily, I have to touch wood, but luckily they didn't go wrong very badly for us. But they can. And it's really how can you operate at that time? Do you get stressed? Do you get angry? Or are you supportive and communicative? And I think that for me has always been a very important part, because that enables everyone in the team to take responsibility and ownership over what they're doing. And I would prepare with these questions and also allow a lot of questions actually from the other side, because it's not, in a good conversation, at least that's what I believe, it's not the company necessarily that's deciding whether they want to hire the employee. If the person is good enough and really will add value, it's also up to them to decide if they actually want to work with you. So I was really happy to have one-on-one conversation. I'm really looking for a point where you can really have a interesting conversation with someone about their addition to the company and their vision as well, and what they're interested in, what drives them to do what they're doing. And once that's settled, of course, I want to see some code. I would ask for them. You have repositories or whatever you can send me. But generally, that would not be the first priority.
Okay, that's awesome. I love that you said you're kind of sharing that vision, because you are initially in a startup phase. You don't really have a product yet. You don't really have a user base. I mean, you guys had kind of a community, but you need to attract people with a shared vision. And it's even more amazing that they can also contribute to that vision and probably give you some ideas of how to go or where not to go.
Yeah. We were really dependent on that. I mean, let's face it, we were in our young. So. And
you guys were definitely trailblazing as well when it comes to the domain.
I guess. And that really, you can be honest about that. I need to learn from everyone that we hire as well, and they need to lead us through a lot of things too. And that really is important in terms of the dynamic. You need to trust a lot in each other, because someone joins your vision or your company. And I'm really happy as well with that focus and people that are able to challenge every idea. Sometimes annoyingly so, but that's part of it, right?
I mean that comes with it. I'd say if people have a strong sense of ownership, they will challenge you on a lot of aspects.
Yeah.
Which is completely fine. That makes the product better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and also increases the trust and the bond between people, I think. Yeah.
Exactly. So speaking of the product, you formed a team and you attracted enough attention to hire people as well. How did you go about actually developing this project and putting it out live?
Wow. So, well, as I said, there was no process.
Yeah.
Really not. So we scrambled to set something up, basically set up something in the cloud, made a decision for what cloud provider we're gonna pick, and just started very iteratively, very scrappy. And then the first step really was we need a product owner. We need someone that is capable of formulating to a very high level of detail and granularity what we're going to be building. So that was definitely the most important step when we found a really good product owner. Then from that point on, it was really hiring, and actually using also. We actually worked with Xibi as well at that time.
Interesting.
It was really cool, to set something up from scratch.
Yeah.
And that's really when we needed a few architects, and I decided to do that externally because it's a short-lived project. You need to leave with our team should leave with a lot of knowledge and then be able to take care of it on their own.
Exactly.
And getting those ideas in can take a while. So that's really what we basically decided to do is product owner, external people, grow the team in that time as well over a period of like 3 to 6 months. Then we would take over on our own after like 6 months. And that way we were able to release the product and still eventually end up with an architecture that was, say, 70% of what we wanted. And then we could do the last 30% ourselves.
That's awesome. So you kind of got that jump start in by looking externally rather than hiring the people you needed and the skills you needed.
Yeah.
Because you took the responsibility of actually executing more so than kind of imagining what the architecture should be.
Yeah, and I don't believe in like if you develop a product, specifically if you develop a product, you want to have a lot of the knowledge and vision internally, and you want to like create a kind of a pressure cooker of ideas. Yeah. And naturally, eventually, you start to settle for like a system, like a process, and that didn't happen to us because we were so early stage. But it's usually in this kind of storming phase. Yeah. Then it's really useful to get a lot of new ideas in from people that do not have the same skin in the game, because they can provide a really good perspective in discussions and conversations. Yeah. Because when you are still storming and everyone is kind of still figuring out like what is your role going to be? Yeah. How do we relate to each other? What's the kind of social dynamic and hierarchy that we're choosing for or eventually settling on? Yeah. Then you end up with more in-depth discussions and more clashes. Yeah. Whereas someone that doesn't have any skin in the game, exactly, they can just offer a neutral idea, and that really helps to kind of keep a good progress in terms of discussions and decisions.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I mean, you rely on those people for that outside how do you say that? Perspective.
Perspective, yeah.
That's the one I was going for, yeah. And you mentioned storming. Do you mean event storming then as well?
No, I mean, you have these phases a team goes through. Yeah. I think it was forming, storming, norming, performing. Yeah. And I'm not like hell-bent on all those models, but I definitely feel that we definitely went through a storming phase. Okay,
that's awesome. Yeah. How did you guys go about user testing? Because to me, that's always an important aspect of product development. I mean, you want the user to give you their feedback so you can make your product better. How did you guys go about doing that?
Yes, that's interesting because, and this also ties into our us joining BUX. At that time, we were actually very lucky with the community, because the community they have skin in the game. Yeah. And they're super willing to. They have a vision as well, because they subscribe to your vision, and they're super willing to do testing. So it wasn't hard at all, actually, to find people that were willing to do that.
Awesome.
So our product owner took care of most of those things, and we were able to get a lot of feedback on the product. To be honest, sometimes a little bit too much. Yeah. Because it's difficult to... I mean, eventually, you have to run the product and make the decisions. And if you have a few people delivering ideas externally, and I think in the typical product company, you would have users that have some ideas. But if you're a startup, you don't have users, so you have to decide everything. In our case, we were heavily outnumbered, basically. Yeah. So we had a lot of strong opinions from the community, and we had to figure out, like, okay, what do we choose now? And where do you decide to sometimes say no? And that's probably not going to make everyone happy, but you have to kind of structure your decision.
Yeah, I can imagine that when you get feedback, it's of the more vocal part of the community, while there could be like a silent majority, let's say, and you still need to keep track of your vision and be like, no, this is where we want to go. So we have to say no and make these kind of harsh decisions to the
Yeah.
people that are vocal.
Yeah.
How did you guys communicate? Was it somewhere online where they could contribute, or how did you reach out to that community that you keep talking about?
It's all in Telegram, basically.
Yeah.
That's really where it all happens.
Yeah.
Everyone just joined our Telegram channels, and that's basically the pool that we used also to set up user interviews and such, and process all that feedback, and also get input for designs and other decisions.
Yeah.
And we also had to share progress updates and do AMAs and such to really develop and maintain a relationship with the community.
That's really cool. Do you know how big your group got on Telegram?
Wow. Yeah, at some point it was around 20,000 people.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
It definitely shrank a lot, but yeah, that was big. I think at the time we did the ICO, for example.
Yeah,
it was really interesting. If you would follow the Telegram channel, because there was like a really crypto boom happening already.
Yeah,
the amount of messages was. You could not follow at all. It was going so incredibly fast that there was just images being shared. It was quite interesting to see like how active a group can get like that if it's prime time.
Yeah, I mean, if it's 20K and let's say 1% is having a discussion, that's still 200 people sending out their messages, and you have to keep track of that, I guess, to a certain degree.
Yeah,
yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned coming in contact with BUX later on. How did that happen?
Right. So. I think always, and especially now in retrospect, we figured out that we've always aligned in terms of vision or values rather. So BUX really does a great job at making investing, which is also complicated in kind of the traditional world, like stocks and ETFs and such.
Yeah,
they make it very easy. Like they have a very user-friendly app. They have a lot of users. They spend a lot of time on thinking about branding, communication, and the simplicity of user experience.
Yeah.
And that's really something that we also focused on a lot. Turns out, actually, from a technical perspective, we also had quite some matches in terms of our architecture and decisions that we made, cool. Which made it quite easy for us to communicate with each other, just about like, what are you building, how does it work, and such.
Yeah.
So we were already in touch with Nick, who is one of the founders of BUX, quite early on. He was a user of Blockport. He followed the project, was quite nice. And in 2019, when Blockport basically went, we stopped, more or less, we went bankrupt. Then we were talking with Nick, and it turns out that this alignment on values and vision, and also their interest in crypto, really was a reason to continue the conversation. And then eventually we realized that we really aligned on making investing, like opening new asset classes, making investing easier for people that want to do more with their money, as BUX says. Which is definitely something that I'm really happy in retrospect that we agreed on such a vision together, and now that we're working together, is also looking really like an integration that's happening rather than working in silos. So that's very nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, just to step back a bit, you mentioned bankruptcy of then Blockport, I guess. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Was that before you got in touch with BUX?
No, that was after.
Yeah.
It was really just a conversation of like, it was more a user or an interested user rather than really a conversation about us joining BUX.
Yeah.
So it was we were already in touch, but that was really just like high level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So first it was low key, I guess. And then you actually got into the conversation of like, all right, let's join forces and let's do.
Yeah, and it was a difficult phase for us. I mean, you invest a lot of time and effort into something, and you make good decisions, and we made also a couple of bad decisions, I think.
Yeah.
Which is natural, and one of them I think really was a good one in that sense, is that we decided not to give up.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to actually create something and still at least bring part of that vision to life. But it was a difficult period because the company stops. The music really stops at some point, and the crypto market went through a winter, and that really was quite impactful for us because we're a trading company, right? So we first of all, revenues would be done by just trading volume, and that was just not enough.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you guys started in 2017. For the people that don't know, end of 2017 was a bull market, as they call it, in which the currencies just went straight through the roof most of the time. And then 2018 and 2019, it was kind of, let's call it a bear market, where there were kind of lower lows and less trading going on.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's kind of the reason why you had way less trading volume and you had to file for bankruptcy. Is that an assumption that I can make?
Yeah, that's fair to say. Yeah, I mean, naturally these things are very complicated, but definitely the market has a huge impact on that. And also, you're developing a product for a market that at that point does not exist, and there was a lot of, it was there, but it's not as large as the whole vision starts with, right? So you have to really adapt, and at that point, I think it's really important to. I believe in the idea of you have to always be deciding, basically, when you're running something. You cannot, hope is not a strategy. You cannot hope that it will end. So you have to decide at some point, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Because we're looking at this reality right now.
Yeah.
And that's really a point where you have to say, okay, this is the decision we're making.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. A good learning experience.
Yeah, I can guess so. Yeah. So in joining forces with BUX, I mean, you came from a position where you were in charge. You got to decide kind of the team that you assembled, also the processes that you put together in place. Did that change when joining forces with BUX, or did you get to keep that part of autonomy, let's just call it?
Right. So I think it's it depends on what aspect you're looking at. So we were lucky actually to have most of the team members that we had at Blockport that we needed.
Yeah.
We were still in touch. I would say that the culture also was pretty family-like. We were really close as a team.
That's awesome.
And that really helped because when we started again with BUX, we were kind of distributed and we kept in touch and people did their own thing.
Yeah.
But then at that point, we actually kind of reunited a part of the team that already knew everything. So it was actually quite wonderful because then you can start with a team and a product that you ran.
Exactly.
And it was also really quite nice that the from a technical perspective, the architecture matched. So it was easy for us to communicate at how does everything work.
Yeah.
We both use kind of reactive systems, so very event based and such, and use Kafka. So that was nice. And then what was really getting used to, we were a way smaller team.
Yeah.
So I would say we went from an actual team at Blockport.
How many people?
At Blockport, we were around, say, 22 engineers, around 30 people.
Okay.
And we went from a team, because that's really a team size. You have a few teams running and doing things, and there's a communication dynamic developing, and it changes a lot. And then suddenly you're 5-6 people.
Okay.
And that's what we started with BUX Crypto.
Yeah.
And that changes because, first of all, you've developed a platform that has a lot of domains.
Yeah.
So, and it's not very simple, the domain itself. You have crypto and trading on their own are already relatively complicated. And then on top of that, you get compliance.
Exactly.
You need to do KYC, which we luckily already did. But it definitely opens up a lot of new topics. Then with that team size, it's not a team anymore. It's rather individuals.
Yeah.
And I think we really would not have been able to pull it off if it wasn't that for the previous team to join us again.
Yeah.
Because they had all the domain knowledge and such. Now we're actually getting to being a team again because we're growing. So that's great. But the biggest learning experience of joining BUX, I think, for us, as I said, you make some decisions right and some wrong. I think compliance is a big topic. It's really important. We always believed in compliance, but it's a pretty complicated structure to navigate, especially if you don't have all the information and the connections and such.
Yeah.
And I think we learned a lot around doing that the right way at BUX. So that's a really positive side. And we're extremely autonomous. I think BUX also has an engineering driven culture pretty much. We were very engineering driven. And that allows for pretty, I think, effective execution. I really believe that it's super important to have engineering really high up in kind of the strategy and where the product is being shaped. Yeah. Because it's part of product as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so close to each other that it needs to be as high as the product, if not higher, with culture and processes and team building going on at the same time as well.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, awesome. So then BUX came in, and I mean, they have the, you call it compliance, they have the compliance knowledge, at least from their previous experiences as kind of a stock exchange, right?
Right. So BUX is a neo broker. Yeah. So in that sense, it's slightly different than a typical exchange, but they're simplifying what previous brokers have always tried to offer. Yeah. And in the Netherlands, actually, it's quite strict overall, which I have to add is not necessarily a bad or a good thing. I don't have really a value judgment about that, but it's definitely important to navigate that well. And the thing is, you get the way I see it at least, is you get more options because you're larger, you have more knowledge, better connections, and also just more power and more funds as well.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you're slower because it's complicated decision making. Things have to be reviewed.
Things take time.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, if you're a startup and you're in an unregulated industry, you can just do whatever.
Exactly.
And if it doesn't work, you just revert it and you're set.
Yeah.
But things are not so reversible in a legal perspective. Like, once you do something wrong, you already did it wrong, and then you have to really make sure
to face the consequences.
Yeah, and that really changes decision making processes, rightfully so. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the longer processes take, the more irreversible they will become. Also.
Yeah, there's probably a relationship there.
Yeah, I feel like.
Yeah.
So from a personal perspective, I mean, I would think it's interesting to first start up with a startup, let's call it, and then join an existing company back again, because your dynamic kind of changes in what you were doing versus what your goal is in joining that company again. How did you experience that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question. So, I can only, as you asked for, I can only answer this from a personal perspective. I think what I love about startups, and it's a really personality-driven thing, right? So
sure.
I thrive in environments where we have to create order from chaos.
Yeah.
And that means that I don't necessarily like chaos, but it's rather that it definitely makes me tick, right? And I see the same thing in the team that we have right now. And that dynamic changes when you start something and you're very small, there's no structure, nothing, and you have to kind of get to kind of a baseline of processes and structure.
Yeah.
Now, we came in with what we thought was structure, after running Blockport for 2 years and such. And then we saw like real structure. And I'm not saying that BUX is like a super structured environment, but rather there's definitely more time put in thinking about like why we're doing this in this way. You have a department for that, and we didn't have those notions.
Yeah.
So I think from a personal perspective, it changed a lot. I would say, it's less easy to just suddenly do experiments. And that was really kind of the mindset.
Okay.
If you want to do something at Blockport, like, just do it.
Yeah.
We launch something next week, we try it out, we work through the night and see what comes out.
Yeah.
And that really changed. I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. I would say that overall, from an engineering side at least, you get the time also to recuperate a little bit and think about like tackling certain things around your technical depth and start thinking about things in a more holistic sense rather than just creating or releasing features.
Yeah.
So it depends. Pros and cons, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, you mentioned kind of testing the waters and experimenting more. My previous guests actually have mentioned that is one of the cruxes in kind of bigger organizations, and that it is very hard to do that in a bigger organization, but also so valuable. I mean, from an academic point of view, you always kind of A/B test, and you try and you see what works better for you, and you go that route based on that.
Yeah.
So you guys still experimenting? I mean, you mentioned doing less of that.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, as I said, you get more options if you're a bigger company, and I think that's actually, that's awesome. That's what you want as a business. You want to have options, and you want to be able to navigate, especially a complicated landscape. And what is indeed kind of sad is that while getting more options, you also kind of give in terms of your capability to decide what option is best based on information and just random experimentation. Yeah. Because the consequences are more severe. Like, it takes a longer time to recover from certain decisions and such, because you're just a large organization. So what I believe is, and that's kind of also ties into the decentralization idea. I believe that there's definitely a balance to be found in allowing a lot of autonomy, which more or less ties in with aspects of decentralized governance. Yeah. And so we're not necessarily experimenting more, to actually answer your question. I would say that we do that less. We're looking for ways to do it more. But it's certainly less structured how we did it, and it takes a little while to actually catch up on how you can do a really good structured experiment, because we run on web. And in the web, it's pretty easy to do experiments. But when you run a native app, which what BUX offers only native apps, experimentation is also a little bit more complicated. So we really have to figure out the proper way to do this. And when you're dealing with financial products, it's also quite difficult, because you need to do like a lot of testing. Because if something goes wrong, your accounting doesn't check out at the end of the day, it's going to be a lot of work to try to fix that. Yeah,
the stakes are a lot higher in that regard.
They are, and I think that's also something I underestimated maybe in the beginning, is that when working with typical products, it's quite a lot easier to do experiments.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with transactions and you actually need to have a very strong guarantees, then also from an engineering side, it just changes stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right now, I'd like to take the time for the viewers, actually. If you guys have any questions at the end of this session, we're going to do a Q&A, so you can just post them in the chat right there. Thank you.
I actually have a question for you as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
When did you get into crypto? Because I know that you're...
It was 2017, actually, kind of mid-2017. Right. My colleagues were talking about it. A guy had mined his own Bitcoin and was kind of getting me enthusiastic about the idea of kind of decentralized currencies and your own managing your own finance that way, that sort of stuff. So at the end of 2017, that's when I actually invested and got more of an introduction to the community.
Cool.
And more introduced to a lot of different coins and technology that's out there.
Right, and then from that point on, you started just looking into is it more from a technical side or? Yeah.
It's both. I think the social dynamics are very interesting. I think coming from 2017 and seeing what's happening now, there's a lot of misinformation, and I also like following the psychological aspect of how things move, what communication is out there, and how the market reacts to that, or how the people react to that. So it's both from like, let's say, a technology point of view, a visionary point of view, and more of a psychological aspect as well. Right.
Yeah, that's also one of the cool things I think in crypto is that it combines psychology, technology, even in some aspect like geopolitics and such. Like you can go really far with thinking about like what is the impact here.
Yeah.
That makes it such an interesting kind of domain to dive in, because you don't have to be technical to actually find it interesting. It's interesting from a lot of other perspectives as well.
Yeah, I mean, investors, I don't think they understand, let's say the majority, and this is my personal opinion, I don't think the majority understands the technology. But they do invest because they see it as an investment point of view. So you don't necessarily, in my opinion, need to understand the technology. But as soon as you have kind of an idea of the vision, that's something you can put your money behind, as many people have done. I think.
Really, it's ideologies that are kind of realized through technology.
Yeah.
And you can decide like there's a lot of layers to it. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I really agree with that.
Yeah. So you started out with kind of a vision on where, let's call it, the crypto community and the technology was going as a whole. It's now 2021. Is your vision still the same? Have you confirmed some of the assumptions you had back then?
Wow. My vision is definitely not the same.
Yeah.
Definitely not. I think I was bullish, so to say, on crypto also in 2017. I would say that I became more bullish over time. And I think I actually severely underestimated the scope of what crypto could do.
Yeah.
I didn't envision NFTs, for example.
Okay.
I didn't see that coming. I mean, it made sense.
Yeah.
Once you start reading and like, non-fungible tokens, pretty cool idea. We can do digital art and such.
Yeah.
What I still very, very much hold on to is the idea of the fact that we can distribute what I would say like power, rather. Like the fact that there are so many people that do not have the ability to save funds.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, like, there's a lot of people that don't have a bank account.
Yeah.
But there's actually many of those people, they have the ability to access internet and a device.
Exactly.
And most of the mobile phones nowadays, they have a secure enclave where you can just store you can store very sensitive data there, like a private key.
Yeah.
And that's one of the fundamental kind of aspects of my personal vision there, is that we are just organizing information in the end.
Yeah.
And I think it's taken quite a while, like internet era, to get to the infrastructure that we have right now. But what always happens when, you have to build something that solves problems. And in that sense, and you're dealing with limited information at that time, like the Internet Engineering Task Force and all that stuff. Like they didn't know everything, and there's a lot of improvements, but we're still running on very old infrastructure as well. Like there's issues in the internet with BGP, and like sometimes the half of the internet's down.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, blockchain is in some aspect is nothing more than just infrastructure. And then on the other level, it's also programmable money, right? So. And that's really what I believe, is that there's a very multi-layered like applicability, and that's also why it's hard for people to decide like is crypto valuable, because you can attack crypto from the environmental aspect, which I think is arguable.
Yeah.
But then you can also attack it from the financial aspect, the money laundering and such. You can also attack it from a technical aspect, but it's slow.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I don't think these are all needed together to actually get the benefit, right? So we could use the infrastructure separate from the money. We could use the financial aspects without some of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
We can also mine with less environmental impact. So, and I think that's really the way we have to look at it. It's like a really layered or a system of components and modules that all have different purposes, and they don't necessarily tie in that much. They could, but they don't have to.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Then that also means you would see that in different technologies out in the space, because they would need to focus on those aspects you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. You mentioned NFTs, and I'm not sure if everyone knows what that is. Can you explain non-fungible tokens?
Yeah, sure. So generally, when you have a token, one token is basically is not identified as a unique token, right?
Yeah.
So if you and me have one Bitcoin, and we exchange it, it's not as if anything really changed.
Yeah.
Because we still have one Bitcoin.
Exactly.
But when you're talking about NFTs, that's not the case. So you would have NFT A and I would have NFT B, which, for example, is a piece of art. Like I make a nice paint drawing and I make that into an NFT and you do the same.
Yeah.
Then they're fundamentally different things. So and that's what you call kind of non-fungible. So they're uniquely identified tokens in a way.
Exactly.
And but the cool thing about this is that people can sell them. So there's like markets and like a whole community and really fast and big as well, developing around this with NFTs being sold for up to millions.
And how do you create one? Because you can sell one for millions, let's say. How do I create an NFT around something?
Yeah, it's interesting. So you basically just publish the NFT, as in this is what I have to sell, and you can pay me for this particular kind of on-chain recorded piece of art.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing here is that, and that's a question I also got from others. Well, yeah, but you can still copy the image, right?
Yeah.
And that's true. Like theoretically, you could just send me a screenshot of the image, and I'll still have something that resembles that. But I'm not the actual owner, and it's recorded on chain that I'm the owner.
Yeah.
So in that sense, those things are kind of separated. So if you're an artist and you want to create an NFT, you create your artwork, and then you just tie an NFT, which is an on-chain kind of recorded identifier for the artwork that you have.
Yeah.
And then that's what you would sell.
Oh, that's awesome, because you would identify then as the owner instead of all the copies that might be around there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and people actually value that ownership because they would pay for it.
Yeah, and I think it's really, it took me a while to realize, but people are, and it's not a bad or a good thing. Again, it's remarkable to see that people are actually interested in pretty simple things, and it makes a lot of sense, and that's cool, because some of the questions you get from a more technical side is like, well, NFTs, does it make a lot of sense? I can literally just copy the image. So, but what's the value there? But there's a social and a cultural value there, and I think that's really important, and that's also why I think it ties very nicely into art, because that's also hard to define systematically. Art's subjective.
It's vague, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's cool. I think it's really beautiful that we've now kind of entered that realm of that we're able to provide value for something that is so rigid as a technology, and also so much focused on like consensus and really structured aspects, and then we can actually support something like art, something so abstract and vague.
And that's been there for a while. Like it's established.
Yeah. It's probably here to stay. Yeah.
Awesome. Looking back for me personally on 2017, there was a lot of technology out there then that is not really relevant now. Obviously, some stuff has survived, but there's always new stuff going in and out. It's like completely the Wild West sometimes.
Yeah.
Why are there so many like different technologies popping up and going down, and like why is it the Wild West, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the feeling I get is that, well, first of all, naturally, it's the obvious answer is it's about money.
Yeah.
People can make a lot of money there, which I think is a reasonable goal to have. But there's also what I find so cool is that there's a very academic aspect to it, or at least if you become motivated by on an intellectual level by knowing better than someone else, or looking at someone else's work and thinking I can do that better, then the crypto world's probably pretty nice for you. And that's what I see a lot. Like there's this nice intersection where you have people, engineers or researchers that look at consensus algorithms and such, or cryptographic aspects, and they think, Ethereum, nice idea, but I can do it way better. And then these people are then tied together with people that are more focused on the business aspects, And I think that's really quite a nice combination you get there, because it's such, and that's the really positive aspect. It's so much in the public domain.
Yeah.
And I think that's easy to miss as well. It's like open source software is a thing. But in this sense, crypto's taking it one step further.
Yeah.
And I think that's really nice.
Yeah, it's completely out there. And I mean, that's why I think speed to market, or how do they say that? Speed to launch?
Time to market.
Time to market is so important, because if you're, let's say, more established and you're a bit slower in your decision making, someone could pick up that idea and just crush it with time to market and just leapfrog you, basically.
Yeah.
Which is really, really insane.
Yeah.
So that's why you think like things are popping up more, going down more, because of that kind of openness and accessibility, let's call it.
Yeah, I think that really helps people to know what they want to improve on, right? Because I can, theoretically, I can go online and just go into a rabbit hole for weeks and understand every detail about Ethereum.
Yeah.
And that's generally not possible in traditional markets at all.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is then I can do that and I can figure out like, well, nice, but I can do it that way.
Exactly.
And I think the fact that you have that really opens up a lot of interesting potential innovation.
Yeah, exactly. And probably lots of the coins out there have done that.
Yeah, and then of course there's also shitcoins, right? And that's part of the world as well.
I mean, that's how it goes.
Yeah,
yeah. I think it's changed a lot, and it's definitely maturing. But there's also a danger in there, I think. I mean, I've seen, I'm just going to call them out. Elon Musk has tweeted a lot of things that have affected the market completely, either in a good way or in a completely bad way.
Yeah.
And people have either made a lot of money, but probably more so lost a lot of money that way as well. So you can see kind of the immaturity that's still in the market.
Yeah.
When do you think that'll mature up?
Yeah, so I'm not sure when.
Yeah.
And I'm also not sure how, because crypto can be, like, it's already becoming partially regulated.
Yeah.
But certainly, I don't think the intention should be that it becomes similarly regulated to other currencies. And I completely agree. Like you now see that there is companies and individuals like Elon Musk that have too much impact there.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I tend to see it as growth pain. And I mean, it really, just to say it how it is, it sucks that people lose money like this. But on the other hand, it's also very important for any individual to be a responsible investor. And I think that's really kind of where we have to seek the balance. Like, we have to learn from these things that we, as companies that offer trading services especially, you have to offer the right information to users. And this is exactly what regulation is for, right? It's consumer protection. So I think in a way it could be very good. But I would not be able to give any kind of timeline on what would be realistic there. Yeah. I do have high hopes for MiCA, Markets in Crypto Assets, which is a regulatory framework that they're working on in the EU.
Okay.
I'm hopeful for some of the implementation details there. They want to have a framework in effect by 2024. 2024,
that's their aim?
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. I love that you tied it all together in still the responsibility lies with the consumer in this case. So invest on your own accord, basically, and responsibly. Yeah,
with care. Yeah, because especially in crypto, there's a lot of shitcoins out there. Yeah. And it's very risky. And on the other hand, we have also us as companies, BUX and BUX Crypto. We have to inform people about the risk in a legitimate way as well. Yeah,
that's awesome. On that note, I think I'm going to head into the Q&A section of today's session.
Cool.
Again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. And I'll see if I can find some right now. Let me see. All right, let me ask this question from Frank. With your product, you make trading easier for a large group of people that otherwise wouldn't trade. Most BUX ads I see are promoting CFDs, a product that is very risky. It gives me a bad taste in the mouth because it feels like you want to earn money from unsuspecting customers like a casino does. What are your efforts to protect individual customers from losing a lot of money, or worse, getting personally bankrupted?
Well,
that is a big question.
That is a big question. Well, thanks for the question, Frank. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm able to answer it. Yeah. Because I'm not. Even though I do work at BUX and we work together, I don't think it would be right for me to answer something about a different product. Yeah. Overall, as I said just now, is that I think informing users about the risk is very important, and that's something that we are focused on at BUX, and I think that's an important aspect that we should continue to be focused on. And not have a mindset like let's do the minimal amount possible.
Exactly.
But other than that, I wouldn't have a lot to add there because I don't make those decisions. I would be able to answer the same question for crypto, for example. I would be happy to. And there, it's really again about informing, and also, it's really a kind of when you in crypto you have margin trading as well, and I think, and rightfully so, there's just a lot of warnings around like the fact that you could lose all your money. And I think that's the best that we can do, and regulation helps with that as well.
I think the average consumer is growing, just in a general sense. They're looking more towards environmental stuff, for example, image, what do you do for good causes and all that. And that also has to do with the misinformation. If your company keeps giving out misinformation, the consumer will see that at a certain point, and they will respect the right amount of information and the right learnings that you give out. It's true. Like there's more power lying with the consumer nowadays, and I think that's something quite great actually. Yeah, for sure. Let me see. From Dylan Parfit, if you're looking back at your own role within your own startup, where you're at now, which one do you prefer and why? So kind of comparing both roles, the one you've had versus the one you have now. Yeah, this is a really difficult question to answer for me. I don't think I would have a strong preference, but that's also because they happened in order. So I was not capable of having the role that I have now a few years back, but I was also not capable of having the role that I had a few years back before that. So I would say I'm mostly happy about the learning experience and the fact that I could follow up with this role based on the previous one. I think if I look at the amount of fun or thrill I had, that's part of the startup life. That is definitely something that I will probably always look back on in a very grateful way. On the other hand, it's also really quite nice to sometimes have normal working days. Exactly. That's actually quite nice. So it really depends. And I think these things have to go in phases. But overall, I would prefer to have a switch in roles. And that's also a very personal thing. Is one of the interview questions actually I also ask to people on like an architect or CTO level is, what do you think an architect or a CTO is? And the funny thing about that is you can ask 5 different or 10 different people and you'll get at least half that amount of different answers. Because there is no formal definition for these things. And that's why I feel that the perfect role, and that's what I love about my job so much, is you have to adapt. Like your ego, your value, what you do and do not know has to be consistently adapted to the people that you have around you. And it's not important what I know. It really doesn't matter. And I'm making mistakes as well. And in that sense, what I like so much is that you get the ability to reflect on those mistakes and immediately try to fix them, because that's also the responsibility that you have, is to continually try to decide and fix and improve together with everyone else. And that's actually consistent between the two roles. And I want to keep it that way. That's awesome. That's a really zen way of putting it. I mean, you couldn't do what you are doing now without the experience, and reflecting back on that experience and implementing changes accordingly based on what you've learned. I love that kind of mindset, and I'm completely behind it. Not being afraid to fail, but to fail to learn from, basically. That's really cool. Cool to hear that. Also, cool. Let's see. For now, that's all the questions we have, actually. Guys, if you have any more questions, just put them in the chat and we'll get to them. I was actually wondering, now that we have a moment anyways, how do you look at some of the projects that are out there? Like, are there any particular ones that you follow or are interested in from a crypto side? Up until now, I've just followed the main two, so more Ethereum and more Bitcoin. I've always kept an eye on some of the smaller stuff, just to see how they would grow, or kind of to keep track of what they've accomplished and where they're heading. One in particular that I got in touch with really early on in 2017, it was called Rayblocks at the time, it's now called Nano, is one in which transactions are instant and feeless. Because that is kind of the large pain points of Bitcoin. It's also where the environmental problem comes from, in the proof of work that needs to go in there. Whilst Nano is completely fleet as, well, how do you say that? it's instant and it's feeless, basically. There's no mining going on.
Right.
So that's one I've always kept an eye on, just because of those two aspects. And I don't know exactly how they've done that from a technology point of view. I don't really care. I care about what they do with that from a product point of view.
Right. Yeah, that is actually quite valuable. So I don't know a lot of projects. So I tend to focus more on the I really like the idea of interchain, so that we can have all these chains communicate with each other.
Yeah.
But it's certainly valuable for like really small transactions. So IoT, of course, is a typical example of where you need fast finality, so like fast settlement of transactions.
Yeah.
And then also very low fees, because the throughput, like the amount of transactions, is of course way higher.
It's
so
insane.
You don't want to, I don't know, have a sensor in your house that you pay like 10K for.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I don't, and that's what I like about the interchain side, is that you can have Ethereum, which does a lot of things well, and then you can have a kind of other chain that integrates quite well, that does other things well.
Yeah.
So I hope that's going to become a reality, like these cross-chain platforms, which looks like it's going that way.
Yeah, I think it should be. Any ones in particular that you keep track of, or you kind of just want to mention it in the vague kind of technology sense?
Yeah, I don't particularly subscribe to. I tend, also because there's just so much out there.
Yeah.
And like the amount of projects is too much. I tend to not even be able to pick one. I mean, I've followed Cosmos, for example, because I just like their tech. Because they put it in a layered system, so they have Tendermint and Cosmos. Those are two different technologies that integrate with each other and are capable of doing cross-chain things.
Yeah.
But overall, I really like subscribing to ecosystems. Okay. So I think there's layer 2 ecosystem now. There's DeFi, there's NFTs, there's interchain.
Yeah.
There's all of these kind of ecosystems that are slowly forming, and new projects are created there. Gaming is one of them. It goes on and on.
Yeah.
And that's really what I'm interested in, because those are projects that are probably going to work together or compete together to figure something out.
Exactly. So when you hear about a new kid on the block that kind of interests you in kind of goal setting and vision, do you drill down into their technology as well? Is that something you always do?
I just look for interesting stuff. Like, for example, recently I read about Avalanche, which is actually, it's partly funded by Andreessen Horowitz, which for me is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I look for. Like, do I find any signs of this project being capable? Because that's really what differentiates them, right? Like,
exactly.
In a bull market, it's not hard to raise funds or to create an idea, but being capable of executing it is quite hard. And I think that really comes also down to the tech. So I'll first look at like who's behind it, and then what they're promising. And if it's super high level, then I generally don't dig a lot further. But if it's lower level, then it becomes more interesting, because then they're solving infrastructure problems.
Yeah.
But that's just a personal interest.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, there's a lot of aspects that go into making something successful, right? You have the people, you have the processes they put in place, the product they have out there, and kind of the vision that ties it all together and that they stand behind. Yep. I usually look at the people as well, and kind of the product vision is what I subscribe to the most, I'd say. Yeah,
and that's the culture, and I think I know that you're also like thinking about those things. Culture really is what makes a difference, I think, in a lot of ways. You can have a product, you can have processes and such, but how these things come to be realized is through a culture.
Exactly. I mean, it always boils down to the people that make it, that also define the culture that you have.
Yeah, and a culture is also kind of like, I really like a systems perspective of things, so like system dynamics and such. And it's just an incentive structure, a culture as well. Like you just create social incentive structures rather than economical ones. But still, that's how the system then eventually will kind of optimize, like a fitness function towards these things. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you mean when you say kind of a systems way of thinking?
Right. So when you design like just a software system, you have to of course dissect it into like components. And I think everything is a system in its own way. So we have like thermodynamic systems. We have software systems, as we said, and you can describe kind of how things interact because the thing is, like, the useful things or the meaningful things are generally non-linear. Yeah. So it's pretty hard to get an idea of what's going to happen, but to get any idea of kind of a high-level dynamic, it's nice to have a few variables that you can say, like, well, in this system that we have in the organization, there's these kind of variables that we think are going to be optimized for. And the ratio between, there's this kind of stock to flow model. Yeah. you can like look at, okay, so what is the current amount of people that we have that are working on this problem, and how many people, for example, are leaving and joining the party, and what's their knowledge, and you can look at these variables and like make it really clear and simple on how you can solve a problem. And it opens up a lot of new insights, because you get a new perspective, a very simplified perspective in a way of how to solve a particular problem.
Yeah.
Whereas if I wouldn't do that, I personally at least, I tend to focus too blindly on the problem itself without actually looking at the total kind of the overview of the system.
Yeah.
And sometimes like solutions are in very, very unexpected corners.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that makes it interesting.
That's very cool. It's a very cool way of putting it. I mean, you need to maintain that overall vision of the kind of landscape you're in, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially you also work in engineering. Then it can be quite overwhelming sometimes to work on a large system if you don't do that, like carefully dissect it into all of the smaller bits.
Yeah, exactly. Or understand the thing you're building. Basically, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
Cool. So how has your role kind of changed in your current role? I'm wondering, as an engineer, are you more towards the mentoring now and being kind of, I called it maker or multiplier?
No, I don't do mentoring.
Okay.
I don't think I'm... So sometimes like I can offer perspective.
Yeah.
But I really like to... someone else put it, so I'm kind of quoting, but hire smart people and get out of their way.
Really?
Because
that's cool.
And it does work, right? Because the thing is, like, I think it's important, especially if you have a lot of responsibility or ownership over something.
Yeah.
The risk is that you become a bottleneck. And if I would do so mentoring, I think is important, as in you can help people execute better, but I would rather support them in finding whatever they want to learn and giving them opportunities that are kind of tailored to their level and such.
Yeah.
And then giving them responsibility. And I think overall, it's also just the fact that we generally only hire senior people.
Yeah.
So that makes it quite easy.
Exactly.
So rather, I would just offer perspective, and sometimes a good one and sometimes a wrong one, and then we would all learn from it.
Yeah.
And there's just certain aspects like security that I'm mainly focused on. So my role changed from being... It was already it went really fast into a more operational one as we scaled. So when we were like 22 people at Blockport, it was hard for me to actually do enough engineering.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually good to not do a lot of engineering if you have that role, because then again, you're going to be a bottleneck.
Exactly.
Because you run... Your day is really decided by random events sometimes, and you cannot deliver proper software if your day is decided by random events. So I would just try to focus on smaller projects that would add value but not block anyone. And I found that really in the DevOps side.
Yeah.
Because I'm used to reacting to stuff after a while, because communication is chaotic and systems are chaotic. So when something goes down, you can react. And then also you have a unique perspective because you have a really big high-level overview of everything. And I think that really is quite handy as a basis for doing infrastructure changes or making developers more productive and such.
Exactly.
So that's kind of what I focus on now.
That's really cool. I actually came from more of an operational side, and I moved towards development, and now we're doing kind of both in the current project I'm at.
Interesting. So how do you see then that, how was that transition for you?
For me, the thing I always was missing within kind of the operational side of things I was doing was that developer's perspective, because I would get something kind of that I was responsible for, but I would never learn how it ticked or even make the changes to make it tick the way I think it should, even though I had kind of a dev background from my education. So I could kind of figure out how things ticked, but I never got to do that, basically. I did like having the helicopter view and seeing what systems tied together in which ways and the integrations in between. And I always took that with me when I actually made that step towards development. To always keep that in mind, keep the complete landscape in mind, and also why we're doing things. I always like to challenge why we're doing A versus B, for example, because I like to retrieve the right amount of value in the things we are doing. So sometimes it looks like I'm not really doing a whole lot of things, but that's because I'm doing the right thing or questioning doing the right things.
Right. Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. And that's true. Like sometimes you can feel horribly unproductive after, at least that's what I have after a few days. But then I do realize that the value of your time is not always in the thing that you measure. So you can also do the right thing or prevent the wrong thing from happening and such. And that's really such a unique kind of perspective that you get if you have both a helicopter view and you're able to sometimes change things on the lower end.
Yeah.
Because you can immediately put things in effect when you see room for improvement.
Exactly.
And that's really why I like the DevOps side. So do I get it right that you're in the DevOps?
We don't label ourselves like that, but we're doing both things basically. So yeah,
right.
I'd say we do.
So I just ditch the buzzword, do the thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And you guys have, I guess, multiple kind of flavors within your company, both more of the DevOps-oriented teams and more of the engineering teams, or am I assuming that incorrectly?
Most of it's actually engineering teams.
Okay.
So I'm now setting up together with a few others a DevOps team.
Yeah.
So, and that it's actually quite nice that DevOps generally should be done by devs.
Yeah.
And then operations should kind of provide also support in that sense. But at some point, you want to have a more sophisticated focus on that, and then you get into kind of the realm of a platform team that we're trying to set up now. And I think overall, we just throughout the whole BUX and also in our team hire kind of ops capable devs.
Okay.
And I think that really helps because then you can just give them the controls that they need.
Yeah.
And if they need something, they can ask for it. But generally, they'll be able to figure stuff out on their own.
Yeah.
But from a high level, you can keep things in order. But I think it's really cool if devs can, and important that devs can basically get shit done
exactly.
on their own.
Yeah, I like the term that you put it, ops capable, but I can't really place on how you would kind of make a guesstimate on how someone can do that or not. To me, so from my personal point of view, operation, when I first landed, it was the first job I got fresh out of college. It was a wild, wild west as well with regards to problems. And if I did not have kind of that curious mindset of thinking, all right, it might be this or it might be that, and trying things out and seeing for myself, I wouldn't have made it. Because you need to be exploratory and you need to figure out how things work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the interesting thing is that, at least the way I see it, is that from an ops side, if you want to be ops capable, it's as you said, it's mindset.
Yeah.
Rather, because you have to navigate problems, you have to communicate a lot, you have to communicate also the solutions to those problems and such.
Exactly.
And then, as a dev, you will probably need you need like focus, rigid mindset, and generally experience.
Yeah.
And a lot of knowledge naturally. And I think if you can combine those things, then you get into that realm. And I think when I look at ops capable, I just try to look at like how much ownership or kind of chaos navigation can this person easily do?
Yeah.
And just get people together to solve a particular problem. Yeah. And it's also all about taking initiative, I guess, and being able to offer perspective without being too prominent in the conversation. It's really a kind of a communication thing, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's the taking initiative that I really subscribe to. And also the communicating part of things. I mean, it's a lot that's expected from you. You need to, first of all, make yourself at ease in chaos, communicate what the chaos is and how to solve it, basically. And you can also do that eventually.
Yeah.
It's a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think navigating chaos is also it's a nice experience. Like I think it's. At least that's what I experienced as a dev, like when I was just building stuff.
Yeah.
It was sometimes, maybe you can relate as well, it was kind of sad that I couldn't actually see all the way it was used.
Yeah.
So what is actually happening out there, what do users think, what might be wrong, what might be good, and all those things. And you want to have that feedback. And the more you do on the upside and the more you flatten that, the more exposure you can get to those things.
Yeah, I get that. I think unconsciously or subconsciously, I've always pulled towards that or made it my mission to gain a grasp of things also from an operational point of view. So even though it wasn't my responsibility in the first place, I made it a mission to make it my responsibility.
Nice. Yeah, that's eventually that's how you get stuff done. I think it's also if the culture is there to, I really believe in vulnerability. So I think, people are going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think I don't like to work with people that are not capable of accepting that everyone's going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because the way I look at it, at least, is like especially when you're a leader, you have to act like you're always on stage.
Yeah.
And that's because and also as a normal team member, actually, but when you become frustrated or negative about someone else's mistake, then as you're on stage, that will definitely change the incentives in the culture and the system, right?
Yeah.
Because that makes it suddenly less safe. Like, oh, if I make a mistake, perhaps I'm getting consequences or scolded.
Yeah, it's confronting.
Yeah, and now we have to fix every mistake and be open about that.
Yeah.
But I think that safety is the first kind of premise, and then we can expect each other to open up about the mistake and solve it together.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely in engineering sometimes not enough attention for the fact that you have to make a lot of decisions, a lot of responsibility. You're going to make mistakes,
Yeah.
And to have an environment where it's cool to admit those mistakes
Yeah,
and actually
exactly.
promote it. Like, oh, awesome, and good job admitting that mistake, and let's do it this way next time.
Yeah, that's awesome. When I first joined, let's say, my initial job, I thought I was so early in career that I could make any mistake that I wanted. So not necessarily looking at the culture, I just thought I was a wild card. So if I would make a mistake, I would own up to it and be like, yeah, I mean, I made this mistake, but I've also learned from it. So making mistakes was always something that kind of, I guess, came naturally. As long as you learn from it and be open about it. Because I've also seen people that make mistakes and kind of just push it away under something and just hide it and tuck it away and don't talk about it. And that gets nasty when that comes out.
Yeah. Also personally, because you're afraid of that because you have this secret to hide. But how do you see that, by the way? Because when you make mistakes, there's kind of something that I think about every now and then. Is like, is there a preference for sharing it openly, publicly, like in a group, or individually? And I personally tend to feel that mistakes are best to be solved together in a smaller group, because it's easier to communicate about them. But then again, there's also a good side to exposing the mistake to everyone, because then everyone naturally is aware and can have a say about that. Do you have any perspective on that, like how in teams and larger teams?
I don't think it's an or. I think it can work best in kind of both situations.
Right.
And it also depends if you're the one making the mistake. For example, if I made the mistake, I would first come to you as a personal guy and be like, listen, this is kind of what I've did and what I've done. What do you think of it, or how can we solve it, etc. And then you can go make that step towards the larger group as kind of a learning point of view and be like, well, this is what we've done, but this is also how we solved it, or how can we solve it. Just as a way of communicating it better, I like getting a lot of fresh perspective on things as well, and challenge myself to communicate in such a way that other people understand it. Because usually you're dealing with a complex problem, and you've made a mistake basically, and you need to communicate that you've done it, but also the solution towards that.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, you're right. They don't have to be mutually exclusive at all. Yeah, I do feel, when it comes to mistakes, or like the vulnerability side, like the more kind of senior you get, sometimes the harder it is, because you sometimes get the feeling that you're not expected to make mistakes. You're expected to know stuff. And that's the hard thing, because theoretically, I mean, you are. Like, you're supposed to know stuff, because that's why you get, like, responsibility. But on the other hand, it makes it harder sometimes to step over that kind of barrier. Like, okay, but I actually did make a mistake, even though I know that I actually shouldn't have. And when you're a junior, as you said, or when you're just starting out in a completely new, it doesn't matter if you're a junior, actually, but just starting out in a new realm, you're like, do I care? Like, I'm supposed to make mistakes, and that's the way I'm going to learn right now. If you can be open-minded to that, that's probably very handy. But I don't know how you experience it. Like, the more you grow, the harder it becomes. I wonder, like, what are kind of things that you believe also are good ways to deal with that?
I think for me personally, it's managing expectations. I always ask, what do you expect of me? And if they say something I disagree with, we'll have a discussion about that. And I always am open that I am human and I'm going to make mistakes. I'll tell you what I'm good at and what I'm bad at. And even the things I'm bad at, I can do. But then you'll get that I might make a mistake there. So I think openness and honesty is always step number one, and managing expectations from both sides. It just helps put your mind at ease. And also I think that the people that I'm dealing with, it makes it easier for them to grasp where I'm coming from and what they expect of me.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's like, as you grow, I guess it's also important to become self-aware so that you can communicate based on experience what kind of mistakes you could make, and know your own weak spots, and maybe over-communicate that you have them, so that people know what to expect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely open about what I'm good at and what I'm not necessarily good at, and I don't think people mind. I think people respect the honesty. I mean, I've gained some compliments, people saying, actually, I always like it when you say we need to figure things out, or I don't know that yet, but I can find you an answer if you give me a bit, instead of just making a mistake and being like, well, this is it and this is how it is. I'm always like, I need to double check, or I need to figure it out, or I don't know, but I can figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the right mindset to have. Just be open and honest about what you can do. Yeah. And obviously you can still strive to be the best you. Just be open and honest about it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and there will still be cases, of course, where you might not expect to make a mistake, or
Exactly.
you just don't know, and you do say something that eventually turns out to be wrong.
Yeah.
But then it's also about like that part being fine. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you might have a difficult conversation, but someone wise said to me, like, the difficult conversation is where you learn the most.
Yeah.
Which makes it way easier going into that conversation and being like, well, let's just see how it goes, and I'm here to learn as well from other people and to learn from my mistakes.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's those challenges that, I mean, it's all still opinion. I really subscribe to the idea that any kind of, if it's a difficult conversation, it's still just your kind of subjective perspective.
Yeah.
But if you look at what's going to be the consequence, like look for with the end in mind, basically, like not the conversation itself, but what's going to happen after.
Yeah.
Usually, it's pretty positive.
Exactly.
It's pretty motivating even to start having that difficult conversation, because the end result's usually quite nice.
Yeah, exactly. As a person, I'm very nervous, and people will say, well, I don't see that in you, but it's because I expect a lot of myself, the most probably. But the way I put my mind at ease is always looking forward and looking, all right, if I have this conversation, what's going to come out of it? And based on that, I can put my mind at ease and actually go into that conversation a bit more calmly, let's just say it.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think I can relate to that quite well. Yeah, it's interesting, especially considering, you have a lot of responsibility as an engineer.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of system aspects that you have to manage, and you have to make a lot of micro decisions. And I really believe that, especially as we do more and more with startups, and we have less processes where engineers have a large amount of responsibility.
Yeah.
And we're also dealing like in the realms of finance, but also like mental health and stuff. There's a lot of companies now also developing there and such, that the ability to kind of have that mindset, like vulnerability in making decisions, it was not initially part, that's the feeling I got at least, like when I looked at a few years back and spoke to older engineers as well, and my father was an engineer, it was not typically part of the way things were considered.
Exactly.
But now, as the responsibility of an individual engineer becomes quite large, it's really important to have that proper decision-making, communication process in there, because otherwise the amount of mistakes increases, but the consequences are also like way worse. So it's actually an interesting aspect also to what I personally feel is kind of the DevOps. It's not really the best term for it anymore because it's like so broad now, but to that movement is to include these cultural and communication aspects, because it's all about optimizing the way that we can deliver value.
Exactly.
And decisions are part of that.
Yeah, and the whole human interaction there is quite important, obviously.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, cool, man. I think that's where we should round it off then. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
I had a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let's do this again sometime. You'll probably be in London, but we'll manage something.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.